Okay, hello everyone. It is time to look at some news, and for all the quietness that is happening over the last few weeks, I guess it's time to have just a big bunch of stuff happening, because Global has gotten its update, and JP is about 5 hours away from starting its new month, which means new content there too. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and yeah, just figured I would take a look at these brand new global characters, the ones that I am not familiar with. Not that one, but here we are. Fryevia, as well as Zazan, the Unkillable, or as he's known to some people on the global side, the Unpullable. I take no credit for that. I saw that joke being thrown around a bunch in Dr. Dig streams by some wonderful Twitch chatters, so I'm not going to lay claim to that, but I am going to use it, because that's how things work. Anyway, so let's talk about these two new characters, and before, I just want to bring something up, which is bias, character bias. Like, some people have brought it up and saying, you don't really like Zazan, do you? And yeah, I don't like him. As a character, I don't like him at all. I'm kind of annoyed that Globalers, I guess, idealize this guy for whatever reason. I mean, I don't like the character. There's no two ways about that. But that's not going to affect my review of whether or not I think the character is good or not. And some people, you know, it just turns out sometimes you're like, you give your review as a content creator and say, I don't like the character. I think he has problems. And people are like, it's just because you hate him. No, I'll give him a fair shake, and I do have good things to say about Zazan today. Whereas Frivia, I just want to bring this up because if we're going to talk about biases, Frivia is actually a character I really like. Fun fact, she actually made me start a global FFBE account in part with her, as well as another winter character, because they were global exclusives at the time. And I thought, like, her and Kryla and I don't know who the other one was, the one with the snowman, they were all really cool. No pun intended, but I thought they were all really interesting. And when Frivia came to the game on global, I also started a global account about that time to try and get her and see what I thought of her. And my honest opinion was not super great. I just didn't think that she was that good. She was a little bit too hard to build for a new account. And so today, you know, when I'm comparing her, I'm going to actually be taking a look at another kind of tanky-based unit, because I feel like it's a fairly fair comparison. Just because, you know, essentially that's the direction that Fryvia's EX is taking. So I feel that it's fairly fair, but if you're looking for a nice tank, keep in mind that Agrius is probably going to get her EX in the future, so maybe that's the character you want. But anyway, Frivia, the character I actually do like, whose EX I still mostly don't. I mean, taking a look at, you know, this is all roughly the same, and we get into comparisons here with stats, because stats are essentially key, especially when you're looking at a tanking like unit. You're really we're really going to want to take a look at these two side by side to see which ones you end up liking more. And as somebody has pointed out, you can get 100% magic resistance with Frivia, and that's true, but you are making her incredibly weak against other damage types, which are very present and fire does have access to. I would say that while rain is incredibly common, you know, with globalers right now in terms of popularity, I don't feel that's I feel it's even more so with Lordmont, who it seems is just kind of the unifying thing between a lot of different accounts. And as a fire physical, pretty dangerous still to this unit, and you are likely to see him. So that is to be considered when you're looking at this. But otherwise, her stats ended up being kind of better than I thought they were going to be. If you look at her HP, it is pretty comparable just in terms of the raw stats that you have here. I mean, looking at her magic, not the biggest of boosts. And again, I feel like this is probably more towards, you know, that push towards her being essentially a tanking unit. In terms of her agility, not improved here, but does, you know, is slightly higher than you are Mont, and maybe that's enough for you. But of course, skills are a major thing, and when we take a look at Fryvia's skills here, we get a better picture of what we're essentially looking at. So Wind Spirit's Ward is the upgraded version now, and basically adds 20% slash resistance. It's not doing anything extra for magic, that's fine. It's giving her some extra wind resistance, that's not really where we're concerned. But the slash resistance is a pretty big boost. It is enough to counter a major damage type out there, but for the amount of slash resistance you're getting, there are, ways around this. There is slash resistance penetration, or slash resistance ignore, basically, on some stuff into the future. So whether or not this is enough, don't know. Really depends on what's going to happen. We've seen all the time that global ends up getting potentially bigger buffs if a unit is a problem. But, like I said, I do think that there will be, other powerful fire units in the future, and I don't think that this is necessarily enough in terms of resistance. And again, maybe I don't know what it is with the fire element, but whenever I don't say nice things about it, people on Global are like, I love this unit, and you shouldn't say. And like Mashery is another one of those units, I feel like, and she isn't, potentially might be another counter. I'm just saying that in terms of what I think for this unit's resistances, I mean, it's good. You can definitely build off them. I just think that there's potentially a few too many spaces where it could be weak, and I feel like fire is just a lot of places. Taking a look at what she gets for an upgrade here, so her previous, magic barrier damage is now essentially generating hate. It's generating 12. Perfectly fine. There's nothing bad about this. It's just getting a straight upgrade, and it's doing something better than it used to. So I really don't think that there's any problem with that. And last but not least is Spell Veil Blade. 175% modifier that increases her defense and spirit by 20 for 3 turns to self. A good boost for someone who is essentially now taking damage more readily. Okay. Light thoughts on Fryevia. It may turn out after testing that her AI is really good and everything like that, and she is just generally good enough to be a solid secondary tank, or maybe even a primary tank for people who really like her enough. I think that in the tanking field, there are just better options. I think Warrior of Light is just generally still better than her in terms of being a damage reducer overall. I feel that Lord Mont has just kind of become the standard for physical tanking, so much so. And while Frivia is essentially improving her survivability in a lot of fronts, she's not really doing too much in the way that a lot of other new units are doing, which is status effects. And status effects are a big deal. They can cripple your opponents. They can do a whole bunch of other stuff. And that's part of Fryvia's kit that is still missing. So I think that she gets a much better terms in terms of survivability is what I'm trying to say. I think she's way better now. I think that they did give her a pretty darn decent improvement. She got an improval. Yeah, that's right. She got a much better improvement than I thought she was going to get, and I think she is pretty good. But I think in terms of tanks, there are just better standards in the future where new tanks, potentially have a status effect with them that makes them really good. Or in terms of Charlotte, who's coming in the future, who's a better magic tank, she can shut down units' counters. And as we're about to see with some units' counters, I don't even need to really mention Yuna anymore, or Dark Witch, Black Witch Helena. I'm still doing that because apparently it's a thing now. But I do think that Fryevia still falls short in some of the other categories, and I just think that fire is kind of becoming a really good element, but I've seen it more on the JP side recently as being a pretty good element that top tier players are bringing. So yeah, I wish I could say better things. I do give her points. It's just I don't know if it's enough to offset the cost, but I think if you like her, you can get some good use out of her, especially if you build a solid ice team. And that's not an ice joke. I've already done too many of those. I'm cut off for the year. But now we're going to take a look at Zazan, the unkillable or unpullable, depending on your experience. We're going to take a look against Duan, a character that I know from my experience on the JP side is just really, really good. But first of all, let's take a look at Zazan's TMR for a second, which is his jacket. And I do believe it was data mined that I think his sword is going to be farmable. So that's another question mark here. But even taking a look at Zazan right off the bat, he does have a better move and jump than I thought he would have, which is interesting in comparison to Duan, where essentially they gave him 4 and 2. I don't know why. I don't really think that this was necessarily needed. I guess the flavor of this is that he's a ninja and everything, but it's a little questionable. This character is probably very overtuned. And they had to get you guys to spend money somehow. Jacket of the Upstart, 330 HP, 8 defense, 15 evade. Nice little piece of evade equipment. Kind of want it for some other units on the JP side, but hey, we'll take a look at it. Kingspin Cackle. Increase Earth attack by 25 for 3 turns for self, and increase Earth resistance penetration. So Earth resistance, like just Earth resistance, you know, ignore essentially by 50 for 3 turns. It's a strong ability for an Earth elemental character. I think you could throw this on Ketone and she'd be quite happy to get this piece of equipment as well. It is a single use in 26 TP. And we're going to talk about this in a little bit once we come back to it, because I do think it's important to bring this up, but I don't know if it's necessarily going to be the most important thing. But it is a consideration that I'm going to bring up a little bit later. He did get the evasion rate increase. Taking a look at his stats here, buzz apparently from my cell phone, good timing. Taking a look here, if we look just between Duan and Zazan, whoops, sorry. Alright, so bring this down. Here's Duan's stats. As you can see, pretty low luck, dexterity's fine, agility there. And we look over here, 25 agility, 88 luck, so he has better luck overall. In terms of attack, he has higher attack there, and in terms of HP, he is a little bit lower. So there's essentially your balancing act, kind of. Taking a look at resistances, which are always important, Zazan ends up with 15% against sword, so he will be good against other sword units. Again, kind of what I thought, selling a solution to a problem that doesn't quite exist yet on global. Weak to spears and weak to strike. Tifa and 2B will probably do plenty well against this character. Yes, you can build for resistances. I don't care, because honestly, you're just never going to have all of your bases covered in this game. There's always going to be a way around it, because if there was a single good unit that could do against every single damage type, everyone would be using that character already. Not the case. There are always blind spots. But taking a look at it, he does have good natural resistance against shooting and mages. So essentially, he's covered against the 3 major damage types in the game. He's essentially good against this, he's good against that, he's good against that. Taking a look versus Dwayne, for example, he's better against spears, he's weaker against strike and shooting, but overall, comparable between the 2 units. And for status effects, because I always think status effects are interesting because they are a big blind spot on units. He has paralyzed resistance and don't move, and it looks like a little bit of disable. But he has no charm resistance, so maybe that's going to be kind of a weak point for him, especially with knowing that JP is changing or will change in the near future the AI around charm. Basically, that if a unit is charmed, or I think confused as well, don't quote me on this, essentially the AI will not target them because they understand the status effect now. So the AI is slightly better. But let's take a look at skills. So first thing to note, Limit Burst. HP increased by 40% for 3 turns to self. This kind of pads out his general lower HP, but he will have a good amount of HP. It will make him more difficult to kill and everything like that. And, you know, it has good modifier on it. Taking a look at Paladin, he has the stun, he has the HP restored, he has The increased defense and spirit in Sentinel. He has Taunting Blade to generate hate. And Immortal Spirit did end up in his kit, so I didn't think this was going to be there. It is. Good for him. Makes the unit better. Not a hell of a lot else to say. Continuing on, Viking. I don't think that there's anything too much here. I think that his primary kit is good enough that you can essentially ignore Viking for the most part. I think that you can probably run Paladin pretty regularly. Taking a look at Undying Fighter, just as a point of discussion here. The thing that you're losing, he does lose an increased agility by 12% for 3 turns, which is fairly big because it also decreases his chance of being targeted. It does essentially give this character 2 ways to be built. You either run his main job and, you know, get the agility boost and make him more of a ninja, or you go as Paladin and make him more tanky. Either option is potentially pretty good, but there you go. He also loses Leaping Slash, move to a target panel, and has a critical chance on it, and he loses Ripper. Ripper I don't think is a big deal to lose. Leaping Slash and low profile are potentially. The speed boost might be important sometimes, and in terms of move to a unit panel, I've had experience with this. I find this is really good, especially in potentially farming maps and whatnot. But this is the thing, and this is another asterisk on this unit, essentially, and that we're going to have to talk about in the overall. But you are going to have to give something up, whether you're building him. But he does have options to be built. I think there is maybe something in Viking, but I don't think it's as good as your Paladin or just Undying Fighter. The main part of Undying Fighter is pretty darn good. We're going to talk just with the EX, because I assume everyone's going to get this guy to EX who does get him. Excuse me. Anyway, Ravenous Lash decreases healing power. This is pretty common in a lot of units, so I don't feel it's overly special. Nice to have, not overly special. Hamstring decreases agility on the target for multiple turns, but has an incredibly small range on it. So I think that it might be not quite good enough, but will be good in some situations. So it is a debuff. It is good. It just kind of has a little bit too short of range because he might just focus on other abilities. Triple Split has a 50 defense penetration, really comparable to what Cloud has. That's very good, so I assume this ability will be very good, and it is a multi-hit ability. It does get upgraded that when it is a guaranteed hit when attacking from behind, which is interesting. Again, this is probably really good in like manual AI asterisk. Fake Death, 200 chance to be auto revived, or 200% chance to be auto revived. Can auto revive miss? Now I'm curious. 20% HP regain for himself. I assume that when he dies, he would lose the buff from his limit burst, which is potentially a problem for him because you're not. Auto revive is really nice, and I've heard a lot of people talk really positively about auto revive, and it is a strong ability, but you don't get that much HP as opposed to, you know, some other things that just might be better to help him survive. But it is auto revive, and I'm not going to say any bad things. Some people have said pairing him off with Yuna, but I think that's a little bit overkill. You're essentially, because you're not going to be able to stack auto revives, and Yuna's AI is probably just going to cast auto revive on something else. So, I mean, it is good for your team, but I think you might be focusing a little bit too much on auto revive, as I've seen auto revive fail in some spectacular ways where all of a sudden the other team just got 2 in a row, and tic-tac-toe, your character's dead. Tic-tac-toe is 3, but you get the point. I guess Guts, so maybe there's 3 units in a row, and then that feels really bad. But Backbreaker, 200%, 50% chance to inflict disable when from attacking from behind. Very short range on this. I realize disable is a very strong thing, and I'm counting it as a very strong status effect. But the fact that this is short range and has to be used from behind is a little bit concerning. Last but not least, Kingpin Slash does have some range on it, 250% modifier, so it's this big damage ability for getting up to 120. Single, I think it's single a target, but don't quote me on that. Yeah. And to take a look at his counters, big thing, well, he has Fighting Spirit and he has Paladin's Guard. I think the thing to really look is Speed Reflex, chance to counter all damage, with 100% chance to haste, which is a very strong counter. It's up there as well as a lot of the other very strong counters we've seen recently, so I don't really think there's too much else to say, just good. Taking a look at his primary ones that he gets for his main job, Sharpened Blade, Attack, and Defense Penetration. Again, very comparable to what we've seen on Cloud, and that's very strong, so it's going to be very strong here. And Evasive Action, Increase Agility, and Evasion Rate. So yeah, taking an overall opinion, Zazan's incredibly strong. There's no doubt in my mind, and I don't feel sad saying that at all. There's no wonder that he is not purchasable for $50 on Global. Sorry, Globalers, you don't get that. You don't get off that easy this time. Zazan is a very, very powerful character, and I think that in manual content, he is definitely one of the strongest characters in the game, and probably we will see some kind of adjustment to characters in the future to balance out Zazan. Really, I think he's just way too strong. I feel like he's incredibly overtuned. Like, they really wanted to sell you guys this unit, and it's probably going to cause problems in the future. I think it's going to cause some negative impact on the general play of the game for people who don't have him, and I think it's just going to be the thing that Globalers have been experiencing for the last little while that they're kind of annoyed on. And I know, because I've talked to Globalers, where it's essentially you're seeing the same units again and again and again in content because there's only so many strong options, and I think that's going to continue with this unit. I think that he's going to have enough. Like, he's definitely being picked up by every whale. I know I've just seen a bunch of people pick him up on live streams before recording this video. I think that he's going to be a little bit of more of a fatigue problem where people are just going to get tired of seeing him. And I do think that Gumi on the global side is going to have to respond by essentially buffing someone in the future to probably just put him more in check. And this is always been a little bit of the global problem to me, the idea that you essentially have this issue where things get buffed to make them more exciting because globalers know what's happening on the JP side, and it causes power balance issues for the future. And I think that's what Zazan is, a power balance issue. That being said, I fully recommend him. I think he's a great, well-built character in the game who's a total asshole in the story who I don't like. There you go. So yeah. Now, I've said very nice things about him, and here's the part I wanted to talk about earlier. As with all physical characters, one of the strongest things to be remembering about is the fact of bells. Bells is always essentially necessary, and a lot of Zazan's attacks, I will say, don't have the highest AP cost. So Zazan with bells may not be the most high priority thing. But one of the things that I'm putting the biggest caution about this unit currently is his AI. We have no experience with this. Globalers are just getting, excuse me, there's been no testing done on his AI, and his AI has what we in the business like to call the burden of choice. If you look at him, setting him up as Paladin, what does he cast first? Immortal Spirit? Does he cast his fake death ability first? Which one of these does he cast? And there is a slightly other problem of, will he cast bells? Will he not cast bells? Will bells get a priority over it? There are 3 abilities here that are incredibly high priority that you are all going to want to cast first, and that brings into the problem of setting up his AI to essentially be more limited, because in auto content, which is a fair amount of stuff in this game, there may be a lot of times where he ends up, because of high agility, high movement, and everything like that, he essentially gets in too fast towards the enemies, and then kind of drops using a lot of his buff and skills for survivability to essentially focus on something else, which is probably what I would assume his AI is programmed to do: deal damage. He's not a support character, he's very much an offensive character, given the nature of what I'm seeing here. And I don't think that his teleportation ability helps this effect, but I don't think that the rest of his abilities are really helping either. He has fairly good range on some of his abilities, and that could provoke his AI to be a little more focused on that. And you could just it could end up being that this character looks, you know, just amazing on paper, but AI wise, he's just not the best. Like there isn't really a lot of, there's actually, taking a second look at this really quickly, he doesn't have any support skills for other characters, which is a problem to say the least, because that means that he's not staying on your side of the field. His AI is going to be directly charging towards the enemies. Now, this is all theoretical. I will need somebody to do testing on it on the global side, and if it is the case that his AI is fine, then great, whatever. Fantastic character to get your hands on. There's no doubt in my mind that he is a great kit. He is a fantastic kit with, you know, a lot of good stuff. He's what I basically expect for a current JP side character. But at the same time, while all of this stuff is, you know, great when you put it on a list, it's really a question of how much of that stuff gets casted. And I do think that his higher agility is actually going to be more of a problem. I would be way happier seeing this character, given what I've seen in this character's kit, having lower mobility and lower agility, because it gives him more time to set up all of this stuff, to set up all of his buffs, to set up everything on himself and generate more AP, because something's going to get left out probably before the enemy gets in close enough for his AI to switch away from that. Again, with testing, needs to be seen, but I do think it is a really strong consideration, and I'll be very interested to see what happens with Globalers over the next little bit. But my overall thoughts, Fryevia, I just don't think she makes the cut for anybody to really go out of their way to get this character. I think she will be good enough, but I think she will be outpaced by other characters in the future who have more stuff going on. I think that Lord Mont, Warrior of Light, and not to mention the least, the future Charlotte are all way better tanking options overall. But if you were looking for a secondary ice tank to take some heat off the other characters, I do think that Frivia will end up being a pretty nice and good character. So I'll give her a solid B. I think that's about where it's going to go. As for Zazan, I think he's an A, if not an A+. I wouldn't give him an A+, as a matter of fact, just because I'm not convinced that the AI and auto in this game, because this game we've had way too many issues with AI, but I also think that this character is just generally bad for the game. I think that this is just a little too power crept for where Global currently is, and I think it's just going to cause some issues. Again, Global hasn't really shown to be the best in terms of balancing, I feel like, but we shall see. Either way, if you can get this character, if he is not unpullable for you, then he may actually live up to his name of being unkillable. Long video, but lots to talk about. Let me know in the comments how wrong you think I am, and just to say this, just to piss off some people at the end of my video, Heart Fryevia, Zazan, go burn in the deepest fires of hell. See? I gave a good review to a character I hate, and a mediocre review to a character I like. Isn't life wonderful? See ya.